Hi, welcome to Storytime. I'm Dr. Jennifer Bird. I'm a biblical scholar, and I care very much about what people do with what they find in the Bible. And Storytime is something I came up with as a way to promote my book that I wrote last year called Marriage in the Bible, What Do the Texts Say? And I was focusing on biblical passages related to the themes of marriage, the relationship we call marriage, sex, and intimate relations that are harmful. So it started out with that, and then I've expanded it to bring in some scholars, biblical scholars who I respect and appreciate very much. And so it's my honor to get to have some of these people I've watched, or I've learned from, I've observed as in general as a colleague over the years. And today is another one of those where the story time part is about the life of a scholar, a biblical scholar. So I'm trying to expand the expand some of the people who watch this kind of content, expand your knowledge about what's possible in terms of biblical scholarship. So there are a handful of biblical scholars who are fairly popular in this kind of public biblical scholars sphere, which is lovely. And so my intention is to expose you to more people whose work you might appreciate. You might also just appreciate the work that influenced them. So you might be interested in reading some of the scholarship that has had an impact on them, that kind of thing. So story time today does not involve a biblical passage. So I was trying to think if I had any administrative stuff to announce, and I do have one thing, which is someone had asked me to consider doing memberships, and I have started that. They haven't approved it yet, but I know that for some people, it's simply some of you would simply like to be able to support me in a easy, regular way, and so that's how I've set up the memberships. But I'll do release a video to announce it when it's official. But you can look for that hopefully in the next few days. But that's in addition to Patreon and all the other ways that you all support me, which is by showing up and chatting and commenting and liking. And I appreciate all of that. So thank you. Thank you for all of the ways you are here and you support me. And thank you to Pragmatic Crystal for putting all those links in the discussion. I appreciate that. I see several familiar faces here today. So someone asked, actually, which is better for me? And I appreciate you asking, Anina. So through the end of the month, through the end of October, it doesn't matter to me, YouTube or Patreon. I think it's easier for some people to do YouTube memberships because you're already paying monthly for, for the whatever access you have to YouTube. But starting in the month of November, actually, Patreon takes whatever percentage, like 9% off the top. And then Apple is going to start taking 30% on top of that. So almost 40% of what you donate if you're a new patron, right? If you're a new patron starting in November, then you're only giving me about 60% of what you're donating. If you're already a patron, that's not going to change for you. But so I appreciate the question, Anina. Okay, so no cat cameos today. At least I'm not sure. Maybe they'll show up later. That's it for today. So let me introduce you to my guest. I am delighted to have the Reverend Dr. Mitzi J. Smith with us here today. As I mentioned, she is one of the people I've known of her. I've known of her work for a long time, and I really enjoy her. I think you're really going to enjoy her personality as well. So it's fun to have her here. Let me introduce to you some of the things about her and her work. So she is currently the J. Davison Phillips Professor. That means she's a full professor with tenure of New Testament at Columbia Theological Seminary in Decatur, Georgia. She is also the Professor Extraordinarius at the Institute for Gender Studies at the University of South Africa. I might get to ask her about that in here. I'm not sure. I might forget. I'm curious about that. She proposed, so started, and is the first chair of the Womanist Interpretation Program Unit at the Society of Biblical Literature. Let me just briefly note, and we'll probably be talking about this today, but the term womanist is a way of combining gender, which is what's implied by the label feminist, and race. So in particular, in our location, a black-white specific critical lens, although I think womanist would include beyond black, so black-brown bodies of non-white color. anyway, it's an important thing, an important piece of the field of biblical studies, right? To be that person, to start that unit is, it's delightful. So I appreciate that. The space that is creating for that work to be honored and respected. So she's also the member, so she's a member of the Society of Biblical Literature, but beyond that as well, she is a member of the Society for the Study of Black Religion and a member of the Society for New Testament Studies, which is actually a fairly prestigious society. I think you have to be invited to be a part of that, and it's kind of a big deal to be invited into that. So all amazing things. And this is I think many of you would really enjoy her podcast, which is called Beyond the Womanist Classroom. She started that with a small grant from Wabash Center. So I think of when I think about the work that Mitzi Smith has done, I think about how lots of my colleagues and I have conversations about needing to challenge traditional scholarship and theological ideas, right? So much of it in the last 250 years was created by white males, right? It just is a thing. And so when I think of Mitzi Smith, I think of someone who is very passionate about addressing all of the lapses. It is as important for the field of biblical studies as it is for people in the church, or for those who grew up in the church and are looking for freedom from harmful ideas that you were taught in relation to it. So I have several of her books listed in the description. She's just a breath of fresh air. So please help me welcome Mitzi Smith to our conversation here today. Welcome, Mitzi.
Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you for inviting me. It's good to be in this space, and I love your cover picture.
Oh,
on YouTube. Yes.
Oh, isn't that
yes, beautiful.
Isn't that fun? Yeah.
Yes.
Somebody made that for me. Actually, I don't know if you know who Dan McClellan is. Someone made a kind of an icon of him. He's a public biblical scholar, and like a Greek Orthodox, Eastern Orthodox kind of a thing. And someone came up to me and said, "Well, Dan shouldn't be the only one with one of those." And so, that's sweet. Yes. Yeah. So it feels like a sweet honor to have that. Yeah. So Mitzi Smith, you are here taking a break from important research that you're doing right now, actually, on doing a womanist or rereading the Gospel of Luke, right, through this lens of enslavement. So you're taking a break from very important work to be here today. And as you know, I've invited you here. I don't necessarily think anyone here is familiar with your work yet, but that doesn't matter to me. I'd love them to hear a little bit about who you are, and then that will lead into talking about some work that's already out there, also talking about your work. So talking about any part of who you are, any part of your story that helps us understand who you are, why you became interested in doing this work. And so as whichever part of your own upbringing you want to talk about, we can bring it into the conversation, and I'm open to whatever it is you want to share with us. But I'm delighted to learn more about you and where you come from and why you do this work.
Yes, it's kind of a long story. I'm trying to make it short.
Okay, we've got time.
Okay.
Doesn't matter. Yeah.
Yeah, so you could say this is my second career being a biblical scholar. And people would be surprised to know that coming out of high school, I did not want to go to college.
Huh.
I wanted to get a job and make some money. I was tired of being poor. So, and so in high school, I studied office education, right?
Okay.
And it was, I learned to type over 100 words a minute, like 120 words a minute, learned shorthand,
You were going to be an office administrator and just be good at it and do it.
Well, I was just gonna, the mag cards. That's you had the Underwood typewriters. That goes. A lot of your people here may not know what an Underwood. But I know what you're talking about. Yep. You can find it in a museum. And so I started when I finished that. I was actually got a job in Nationwide Insurance, which is big in Columbus, Ohio, right? Huge. And the IBM Mag card, the first computerized, right?
Yes.
Came out, typewriters, right? Or, and the Mag card, and I think I was at Nationwide for a few months, and I said, "This is for the birds." I'm so bored, and so I went. Like I said, I still didn't want to go to college. I went to a 2-year school and studied to be a legal secretary.
Okay.
And worked in a law firm and went to Capital University to become a certified legal assistant, right? So, and then I had a call to ministry, right? Which is a whole nother story. I had a call to ministry. And that call, I was a Seventh-day Adventist then. And I was reading, if anybody knows anything about Seventh-day Adventism, Ellen G. White is considered a prophetess among Adventists, and she wrote a whole lot of books. And I remember going to a camp meeting, and there was a woman who her husband was my pastor at the time. She was a Bible worker. She was the first woman I know of that got a degree, a bachelor's degree in theology at an Adventist school.
Okay. Yeah, but that was a big deal, actually.
Yes, it was. Yes, because that's where the men would get that bachelor's degree, then get a call into ministry, and then a conference would pay for their way to a master's.
Right.
Yes, and so she was teaching a Bible class, though, and assigned a text that's called evangelism, and there was a quotation in there that God can use anybody, but especially those who are trained to do the work. And that was like, to me, God saying to me, okay, you got to get a college degree.
That's how you took that.
You got to go get a 4-year degree, and you got to go to an Adventist school, too.
Oh, wow.
Yes.
Wow. And that felt to you like a call, like a supernatural kind of a God is speaking to me thing.
I would not have left home. I was a mama's girl. My mother was in a wheelchair since I was 10 years old.
Oh, wow. Okay.
And I stayed by her side. Okay. And so nothing else would have sent me. It was so strong, the call. Nothing else would have sent me. I mean, I cried the day I left. I cried when I got there. But I got that bachelor's in theology. And of course, there were no openings for, I really didn't know what I was going to do. I just knew I was following a call. And
which school did you go to for undergrad?
It's Columbia Union College in Tacoma Park, Maryland. It now has a different name, Columbia University or something like that, but it's changed its name.
Okay.
But so I got that degree in theology. I was the only woman in my class.
Wow.
Because I studied theology. I said I didn't know why. I just remember saying, I want to get the same training the men are getting, right? And of course, there was, and I was a little bit naive. There was a white woman in the class before me, Kim. I forget Kim's name. She was a year ahead of me. She got her bachelor's in theology, and then the conference offers her a secretarial job.
Oh, right.
Yes, right. That's in early 1980s.
I was going to say,
yes,
we haven't come that far, but it's not. It wasn't that long ago.
Yes. And actually, I went to a school that was primarily white, but also diverse, probably as diverse as you could get in 1980s.
In terms of, you mean in terms of denominations?
Yeah, in terms of race and ethnicity.
Oh, okay.
And gender. Yes.
Oh,
and I had applied to 2 Adventist schools. There's one that is historically Black out of Huntsville, Alabama. They didn't even consider my application. They were like, this woman's crazy.
Who she thinks she is.
Yeah. She's crazy. She thinks she's going to get this degree here. Because I wouldn't even, if I was a pastor's wife,
right?
They probably would allow that because they know you're just going to help your
knew that you'd be safe. Yeah, you'd have the headship over you or whatever.
Yes. So years go by, and I'm doing what the church says. And I went to get a master's in Black Studies after that. at Ohio State University. I went back to D.C. as a legal secretary, and maybe
after that degree.
Yes, about
Okay.
10, 12 years, 10, 15 years later.
Huh.
I was miserable, right?
Yeah.
I was letting the church say to me, or following what the church expected was, and what they would say is, don't rock the boat, just wait, wait, wait till the boat meets you at the shore. Of course, it never does.
That's an interesting way of
right.
Not even don't rock the boat, but just don't even get in it.
Yes.
Just wait your turn, lady.
But I have served as the first woman elder in a couple of churches, right? In Adventist church, local elder, right?
Yeah.
And that was my home church in Columbus, Ohio. There were other women. They wwere older and married, right? Who could have served, but their thing was, I don't know what my husband was thinking, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, so after I accepted, and I was quite young, then they became women elders there as well.
Oh, really?
So
you inspired them to step up their game a little bit?
Yes. And of course, I'm no longer part of the Adventist church, and so I'm sure they wiped that history from the books. So they have. My sister's still a Seventh-day Adventist. They have. So
for real, they've erased your
for real. Yes. So it's almost like being the word apostate. You've heard that word apostate. Yes.
Heretic.
Yes. You leave the church, and yes, that is the true church, right? That is considered the true church. So if you leave, you have basically forsaken God. And not I wouldn't say every single Adventist. There are friends of mine I still have that are Adventists that I try to keep in touch with, but there are others who think that somehow I will come back to the fold.
Or come back to your senses.
No, we're not going backwards. So years later, I was a elder at a local church also in Bladensburg, Maryland. And I was very unhappy. I'd preach sometime. The pastor was quite supportive, but that I had then. But I would preach sometime. I would help with baptism, but I was very discontent, right? And some of that, and I didn't like the way I was feeling, because I started to feel angry. I started to feel also envious, because in the Adventist church then, even though they may not at the time hire, they still don't ordain women as pastors, but even they would give women who had PhDs and their husbands were in ministry opportunity to preach. So it was something for this pastor to give me, opportunity. But anyway, we had an evangelistic meeting one night, and a guy preached. And this is a guy, I'm sure he didn't expect to have the impact on me that he did, because, didn't support women in ministry. But he preached a sermon about the story of the loaves and the fishes, right? 2 fish and 10 loaves. And the theme, the moral of his sermon was, God is not counting the obstacles. And that said to me, you need to get up out of here and stop counting. If you have to leave this church. And so I did. I left, and I went straight to Howard Divinity School.
Okay. Yeah. I do want to pause on that for just a second and enjoy a little bit that this man, as you said, was being truthful to the message he thought he needed to bring. And it pushed you right on out and into what you needed to do.
Yes.
Yeah. Does he know? Did you ever?
No, I don't even remember who he was.
Okay.
But yes. But no. Who knows? He may know now.
I know.
But anyway, so and there was a church I supported with sometimes double tithes and offerings with my gifts and so forth. And when I left to go to MD, that's not a thing that a woman is supposed to do, right? And a single woman too. I found really no real support from church, right?
Right. Because as you said, just to clarify for people watching, most of the time, not always, but most of the time when a person goes to seminary, they do have financial backing from their churches to afford the tuition and the books or at least part of it. So it is actually a big deal. That's what you're kind of hinting at, to not have the support of a community behind you.
Yeah. So let me say too that thank God for the Biden-Harris administration, because most of my student loan debt came from that period of time. And so recently, even after the Supreme Court, my loans were forgiven, thank God. So, so I think God has a way to catch up, I guess.
Okay, yeah, because I'm in that book too.
Yep. Yeah. I hope that. Yeah, okay.
Been carried it for a long time, and
yes, I'm telling you, and that principle never moves.
You're just not making a dent.
Yes.
Anyway, yes. So I'm happy for you because yes, that was a burden for sure, right?
Yes. And the thing is too, when I got to Howard, there was a guy I had known who was Seventh-day Adventist, who decided to go to Howard to get him his MDiv. That was a thing Adventist pastors didn't do back then. You went to Andrews University to their seminary in Michigan.
Okay.
And this African-American guy asked his conference president if he could go. And of course, because he had already been selected to pastor, they were paying his way.
Okay.
Right. Okay. And of course, that didn't rub me. I didn't hold it against him personally, but didn't rub me well. But anyway, yes.
It's hard. So, all your colleagues are like kind of taking it for granted.
Yes. And I didn't get any, I didn't get any substantial money from Howard either, primarily because I wasn't Baptist.
Okay.
I remember the financial aid guy saying to me, you change your denomination. I don't want to be Baptist.
He did not understand what he was suggesting.
Yes, I did. And I had the best experience with Baptists either from childhood. But anyway, so I was like, that seems like that lacks integrity.
A little bit.
Yes. I think back, I'm like, was I the dumb one? I don't know. Anyway.
I respect your integrity. Yeah.
So I didn't know what I was going to do. I just know I was going to get this degree. I didn't know, what doors would or would not open. And not until my second year, Dr. Kane Hope Felder was there, the first African-American biblical scholar I heard of. I had heard of his books before I got there. I hadn't fully read his books. They were difficult to read. Troubling biblical writers, especially, it was difficult to read, right? So that's an interesting story. So I'm saying, I'm just in awe of this biblical scholar. He was on leave my first semester. I had Dr. Newhart the first semester, because we wrote a book recently together, Dr. Newhart and we are all witnesses. But the second year, I remember taking Greek, and I ended up as a Greek student teaching my fellow Greek students, because I had a Greek as an undergraduate, right? Teaching my fellow students when Dr. Felder wasn't in class. And he was
like teaching the content, not just kind of helping them understand it.
Yes, one of my friends was in the class, and Dr. Felder came back to the classroom. She said, Dr. Felder, you don't put Mitzi in charge of her. She's like a drill sergeant.
Because Mitzi wants to make sure you learn it.
Yeah. So, and he was the first to say to me, you should think about doing a PhD in Bible. And I was like, can I? I don't know if I could do. I don't know. But he was the first one to put that in my mind. And actually, I published my first academic article based on a master's class I did at Howard.
Nice. That's impressive to publish an article from your MDiv. Yeah, that's impressive.
And you can't find it unless you have the African American Jubilee Bible. It's in a Bible.
Oh, it's like one of the
Yes.
the added content kind of thing. Well, what was it on? Do you remember what it was on?
Slavery in the church. Slavery. Yes.
Okay, kind of an important topic.
And it came out the same fall that I entered Harvard. So it came. So I went in there with that published essay.
That's impressive.
And if you go to the ATLA or whatever to search, it doesn't come up.
It doesn't
and that's
even
because
show up.
It's in a Bible. Yes.
Okay. Huh. That's too bad.
The African American Jubilee Bible. Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
So yeah, and let me say this: my first year of applying, I applied to 3 places. They were all in the South. You know, I teach in the South right now. So they were all in the South.
And you mean for PhD work?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
I only had limited funds, right?
Right.
And I didn't get into any of those spaces.
Okay.
And I remember Dr. Rice said to me, he was an Old Testament professor, both he and Dr. Felder are deceased now, but Dr. Rice, who was Old Testament, who I took quite a few classes from, he was a small Quaker, right? And very, very soft spoken, but he's a Marine as well.
Oh, wow, that's impressive.
Yes. He had studied at Columbia. Was he at Columbia University? I think he and both Dr. Felder were there. So, and he said to me, you got to, you should apply to Harvard. I'm like, that was not a place I was thinking of.
It didn't even cross your mind to try for Harvard.
No. And one of my classmates who had a doctorate in social work, right? She said to me, it's very political. You must try again, right? And so I wasn't going to, because of people like that. I tried again, and Harvard was the place I got into.
That is fantastic. Yeah.
But I graduated from, I don't even know how I did this, but anyway, I graduated from Howard in 1998 with the MDiv. I stayed an extra year. I don't know how I got. I don't remember how I got funding for it, but I did it on loans.
Okay.
And I went to the university, and I took 4 language classes at a time.
Wow.
Because when I talked to Harvard, Helmut Kester was there then, and he said, you need to have Latin before you get here. So I went to Howard, and at the time they had one of the best classics departments in the country. I didn't know it. Howard University, yes. And so in the classics department, I studied Latin for a year. I studied Middle Egyptian hieroglyphs.
Good for you.
I was taking conversational German, but I found out I didn't need it, so I took writing, reading German, right? German reading and French reading. So I took those 4 classes in 1 year, and then applied to Harvard.
That's a lot of language, Mitzi. Yeah, that's.
So if they thought, so they couldn't say, "Can she do the languages?"
Exactly. Right. Like, I've taught Greek. I've got. Yeah. So you went to Harvard University for your PhD.
Yes.
Okay. Who'd you study with?
Francois Bovin.
Okay.
Yes. He was a Luke Act specialist.
Indeed.
He's now deceased too.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, yes, he died of cancer. Yes, and the thing is, I didn't know what I wanted to do, but I said, well, I don't know any African Americans that have written on the Book of Luke, on the Book of Acts. I said, so let me. I was one of those people just take a challenge. I'm like, okay, so this is what I want to work on is Acts. And I was interested in feminism. Elizabeth Schuster-Fiorenza was there. Yes. And I wanted to study Coptic since I had Middle Egyptian hieroglyphs. Right. And so I took Coptic with Karen King, and Alan Callahan was there at the time. So I took African American Biblical Interpretation.
Nice.
But I was introduced to womanist theology at Howard.
Yeah. I bet you were. Right.
Kelly Brown Douglas was there at the time.
Yeah, let's talk about her then, since you just mentioned Kelly Brown Douglas, sexuality. You shared that one of the books, at least, that was really important of hers, right, is Sexuality in the Black Church. What is it about this? Kelly Brown Douglas has quite an impressive oeuvre as well, but what what is it about this book that was important for you?
Yeah, so it was a Womenist Theology Seminary. We read her book as well as Emily Townsend's book.
Yeah.
But the book was not out yet.
Oh, okay.
We had access to the galleys.
Cool.
Yes,
That's fun.
Yes. And it really was a challenge because I came out of a very conservative religious church. The Seventh-day Adventist was very conservative, right? And so she was challenging the homophobia, right, of black churches and black religion.
Okay.
And I was just so somewhat amazed given my background, how open I was to thinking differently about the church, to thinking critically about religion. I wondered if I would have a problem, and actually more of my peers had problems than I did, right?
Well, I mean, I was sitting here thinking, even just talking about sex at all is hard for a lot of people from conservative traditions. It's. I mean, I grew up in Methodist church, which isn't terribly conservative, and they don't want to talk about it.
Yes. And Kelly Brown Douglas decided to write that book because she had a roommate in college who was gay, and he died of AIDS. And so she felt the need, right, to write this book as a critique of the Black church. Right?
And the response to people, in particular in LGBTQ, what we call now that community. Yeah. Yeah. So that was a powerful. I love the fact you were just fine with it talking about.
Yes, and that prepared me to be in a space like Harvard, right? To continue that journey,
right,
of transformation in terms of sexuality, right? In terms of the way I had been taught in conservative spaces, right?
Right. Is there? Should we back up to either of Kane Hopefelder's books to talk about the influence they had on you? And you referred to them. I don't know if you want to talk about them specifically.
Yeah, so of course he centered the Black experience, right? And his was more of a recovery, those early Black scholars, the recovery of the Black presence in the Bible because of the erasure of it, right?
Right.
Yes.
And I don't know which one to be honest, I'm only familiar with Stony the Road. I'm sorry, I haven't read Troubling the Biblical Waters.
Okay, so Stony the Road is the first collection of African American scholars and their interpretation with African American interpretation of the scriptures, right? But
Troubling the Waters,
Troubling Biblical Waters came first.
Okay.
And this is a funny story. So we're in his class in New Testament. He had not assigned that book to me, Troubling Biblical Waters.
Okay.
I had tried to read it before I got to seminary. It was too difficult for me to read. But so this is a story. So I'm in his class, and at the time, his New Testament classes, there were like 60 people in those classes, right? But people came because he was a well-known biblical scholar, well-known in Black church circles, right?
Yes.
And I mean, he basically sold his books too out of his trunk. Every time he went to,
every time. Awesome. Good for him.
Every time he went to speak somewhere, right? He ordered those books, right? And so we're in this class, and I guess it hits him, but he's quite upset that all these Black students have not read the Black scholars, right?
Yeah, right.
And so he decides it's not on the syllabus. And I of course I do not encourage any professors to do this.
Right.
And he decides he's going to make us do a book review of Troubling Biblical Waters. He said, now read the book and then choose 2 chapters to look at closely, right? And I kid you not, there are at least 10 people who walked out of that class and they're not coming back.
Didn't come back.
Yes. So
wait, because it was so challenging, you mean?
Yes,
and
it wasn't on the
Okay.
it wasn't on the syllabus.
Yeah, and it wasn't on the syllabus.
So
That too.
I
Okay.
said, I'm not gonna let this book beat me. I'm not gonna walk out of class. I'm sitting almost in the front row too.
Your presence would be missed.
Right, yes. So I went home. I read that book, I think 3 times.
I bet.
I still have it, and I wrote so much. Looked up so many words.
So many words, yeah.
Wrote so much in the margins.
Yeah.
That you can barely see the print of the book. But I'm telling you, I think it was wrong for him to do that to everybody. Because everybody, let me tell you, by then I had quit work because I couldn't do my seminary work every and I did think I would find a part-time job, but I didn't. I had summer work. Okay. I almost got evicted. Everybody can't do that. Everybody's not going to do that. Not that I could, but everybody's not going. I didn't have children. I didn't have children, right?
Exactly.
So I don't think that was. I know he meant well, but I don't think that was fair. But and the thing is that he did too is he. So I said, I'm not going to let this book beat me. I'm not going to let this book beat me. Me and another student, Jacqueline Thompson, who is now the first woman pastor at a Baptist church, Allen Temple Baptist Church in Oakland, California. She recently became the first. So she was in that class. She and I, so he told the whole class that she and I were only two to get A's. So that was not cool either. You
didn't want to be outed like that.
That's right. That wasn't cool. Then of course some of my peers say, yeah, that's because you're not working. I'm like, okay, that could be part of the story.
Yeah. Well, yeah.
Yeah, that's part of it. Yes.
It is.
But so yes, but I'm telling you, it stretched me. It prepared me it helped prepare me for PhD work, right? But everybody's not in seminary to do PhD work.
Right. Most people aren't. Yeah.
Most people aren't.
Yeah.
But it's still good to be stretched, but to be penalized for it, it's not a good thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
So yes, and so from there, so those words. Go ahead.
Yes. No, I was going to say we could bring in. There are 3 more books in particular that you mentioned that were really important for you. Breaking the Fine Rain of Death, Sisters in the Wilderness, and Just a Sister Away. Is there one in particular that you'd like to maybe highlight for our listeners?
Yes, I want to highlight. Well, all of them, were Sisters in the Wilderness focusing on Black women's experience. Just a Sister Away focusing on Black women's experiences, of course. And that's what I do. Focus on. Hopefully, I am privileging the experiences of poor Black women, right? I believe in this trickle. I believe in trickle up.
Oh, yes,
from the bottom up, right? And hopefully, because I grew up, in a poor household, right, with a mother who was disabled,
right?
But Emily Towns' Breaking the Fine Rain of Death was particularly also interesting to me for 2 reasons. One, I grew up with well, let me tell you what the book is about first. Understand. So what she does is she reads the book of Joel, right?
Oh, okay.
And, in conversation with the healthcare crisis.
Okay. And this was this. I'm sorry, I forgot to pick up, to note the dates of these, but this must have been early for her. I don't know.
Yes, it had to be because it had just come out. And so it had to be around 1996, 97.
Okay.
Yes.
So it wasn't, was it post-AIDS? I mean, was it dealing with AIDS?
No, this healthcare. Who has access to healthcare.
Right. Just access to.
Access. Disparities in healthcare, healthcare. And the thing is, before I got to Howard, I did a master's at Ohio State University in the Black Studies department, where I had a scholarship there, right?
Nice.
And I focused on my dissertation out of there. My master's thesis focused on healthcare disparities,
Yeah.
in particularly around cancer. And I looked at 3 Ohio counties with the highest percentage of Black people, right?
Okay.
Which was interesting is that Black people had the lower incidence rates than white people, but they were dying more, higher mortality rates.
Wow.
And what's still interesting today they have higher in both regards. Today, Black people have higher incidence and mortality rates, right? And I found it had a lot to do with access to health care.
Absolutely.
With fear of hospitals and doctors, and sometimes for good reason.
Yes, exactly.
I had found an essay by a white doctor who was in one of the newspapers. This is back in the 80s, right? One of the newspapers, who said that his peers didn't believe that Black people deserved equal care even when they had good insurance. And also my mother, I saw her struggle with the healthcare system, being disabled, having Medicaid, not having access, like she needed therapy, but she could only have so many weeks of therapy. Right. And so forth.
She probably didn't have easy transportation for some of these things.
That too. I remember riding in these handicapped transportation with my mother to the hospital. Records weren't digitized.
Shared. Right. Yes. So you were right.
Every time she went to a doctor, she had a new one who didn't know
have the history.
And some obviously, to me, didn't care. Some did care. Some didn't care. Right. And so to see Emily Towns focusing on this issue when I had already been looking at this a little bit and bringing it in conversation with scripture, right? Yeah. Which is what I try to do, is bring current justice issues in critical conversation with scripture.
Yes.
So that was like my first time seeing that.
Okay. Yeah. That demonstrated very powerfully, I imagine. She is a brilliant woman.
Yes.
Yeah. What is the saying? I attended a session this summer: where you live shouldn't determine if you live. In relation to healthcare issues, right? And how racialized the access is in this country.
Yes. And it continues to be a problem. I'm writing, of course, my memoir, because I had a stroke about 15 months ago, right? As you know, and writing my memoir now. Hope to finish it. Plan to finish it end of January, right?
Okay.
Yes, about that experience, right? There were good experiences and there were not so good experiences.
And you've got some, excuse me, I was just going to say, you have some language to put to all of that, right?
Yes,
in a very powerful way that others can appreciate, I think.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. Thank you for all of that. You reference Sisters in the Wilderness and Justice Sister Way. I think of those as like primers in the realm of womanist voices and biblical scholarship. And I think, as many have said, these are good places to start, but there's still a lot more to do, right? In terms of work. Yeah. So can we turn to talking about some of your work? I just have to say, I just love the title of this one. So I'm going to pull it up first. Where is it? I don't know. Sometimes I have a hard time seeing what I'm looking at. I know this isn't your earliest work, but I love the cover and I love the title. Womanist Sass and Talkback.
Cascade Books does a wonderful job with covers.
I
think they have the best covers, yes.
Good to know. I'm going to make a note of that, because talk to us. So the subtitle is cut off here. Let me go. Sorry about that. Womanist Sass and Talkback: Social Injustice, Intersectionality, and Biblical Interpretation. What is it you'd like us to know about? This is one of your many books, and I know that you've both written and also edited some of these volumes, but this is just you, right? These are all your works, all your essays. The title speaks for itself to a certain degree. What else would you like us to know about this book?
Yeah, so it came out of the idea came out of and started with an essay. The essay I wrote about Sandra Bland. If you remember Sandra
Of course.
Bland, who
Yes.
died in Spring, Texas, in a jail in Spring, Texas. Uh, after being stopped, and after being stopped supposedly for not signaling. You know how many people, how many people don't signal on the road,
Right.
how mad we are every day because they don't.
And it's really dangerous most of the time.
Yes. And she
dead.
was on this road that is not well traveled, and supposedly didn't signal, and out of that encounter, she's dead, right?
Right. 2
And
days
and
later,
and
something or so.
yes, and she at first would not get out of the car, was asking about why she was stopped.
Right.
And she was an activist before this. It's not clear whether she was perhaps targeted because she was
an
on
activist.
social media, a lot.
Interesting.
And she talked, I remember hearing people say, oh, she shouldn't have talked back. She shouldn't have asked about her rights, right? I'm like, that should not be a death penalty.
Exactly.
That should not be a death sentence.
Right.
And I was so, so deeply hurt by that experience. And I have a friend who lives not far, who I went to high school with, lives not far from that instance. She lives in Spring, Texas. I visited her a few years back. But and so I said I need to put this in the way Black women have been demonized as sassy and for talking back, and therefore somehow and thinking about even my own experience where I had been, accused of in certain ways of being too talkative or asking too many questions in different ways, right? And so put that in conversation with the story of the Syrophoenician woman who talks back to Jesus.
That's good, right?
Yeah. So that's what I do. And I said, okay, I need a full book of justice issues.
Okay.
The water.
Not going to be hard to find, right?
Yes, not hard. And one guy, this pastor out of Lexington, Kentucky, yes, who was in a womanist demon class at one time. He said he loved the book and he preached, sermons out of this book. He said my only critique is you need to address more issues. I was like, well, okay. I said, okay, well, that would be part 2 eventually. Yes.
Right. I mean, the critique I think you probably hear a lot, which is there's more for you to do. We need this in all of these other places.
Yes. So, I was teaching in Detroit metro area for 13 years. And I remember I didn't find my voice to maybe 3-4 years into teaching, right? Because, you're busy, just turning out new syllabi and just trying to keep up with teaching courses. But I mean, most of my students there, even though Ashland Seminary, if you go to their main campus, it's primarily a white campus, which I've taught there before, where I've taught classes there where there were no people of color whatsoever in the class. But in Detroit, where I was situated, my class could be from 95 to 99% Black, right?
Okay.
And here I am situated in Detroit. I said, I can't just teach like I'm a white male. I need to teach these students based on what it is they're experiencing, right? And at that time, there was the Flint water crisis.
Oh my gosh.
There was the water shutoffs. People don't know about the water shutoffs. And I remember mentioning someone at an SBL in San Diego once, and the guy, turned to me and said, happened to be a white guy, said to me, said, oh yeah, those people not paying their water bill. I said, no, that's not it is. I'm like, the problem is the water bill has been raised exponentially. 3 times what it was in a short period of time, and people are already at least 50% or 52% of people living in Detroit at the time were below the poverty line. that does not count those at the poverty line. It does not count those who hover around the
right, exactly, the low middle class.
Very close, right? That line is deceiving, right?
It is.
And who are already trying to decide whether or not to feed their children or pay a bill,
which we're going to do.
Bill. Yeah,
absolutely, every month, right?
And to this day, there are people living in the United States who don't have running water. Look it up. There's a place also, a city in Texas that has not had running water for something like 100 years.
What?
Look it up. I was shocked. One of my students told me about that. I'm like, what? So I had to look it up. Yes, I forget the name of it, but look it up and you'll find it. In the United States of America. And so, and it is a predominantly Black community, right?
I was just going to say, I don't want to ask, but I feel like I need to ask. Well, that's just it, right?
So I think that we can't just focus on an ancient text as if this text is more sacred than the lives we live now.
I don't know how to clap here, so I'm just gonna yeah, right. But if people are so connected to these ancient texts, then you are going to use that as a way to show them what's happening in real people's lives today. Am I understanding you correctly?
Yes, to raise people's consciousness and raising my own at the same time, right? I'm raising, how can we live in a world and we don't know what's happening to our neighbors? Our neighbors far and near, right? Our global neighbors, our local neighbors, right?
Right.
And if we know, perhaps we will do something about it. Perhaps whether it is the people we vote for, or in the meantime, what we do at our churches, how we also help raise people's consciousness so that we will be involved in what policies are adopted in our cities, in our institutions, and so forth, right?
Raising awareness is key to being able to address the issues, right?
There's so many people. There is, false information has been out there, or no information. False information, right? Is not new.
It is not a new issue.
But we have not. Those of us who have access, we owe it to each other. We owe it to ourselves. As children of God, and I'm not talking about just Christians, I'm talking about humanity. Right? To know what is happening to our neighbors and how people's lives have been destroyed in different ways. We could end poverty. Somebody said you could take all the billionaires that exist could end poverty alone. Just that alone. So what is it that we can do?
Right. Yes. Right. I feel like I kind of co-opted your story. I wasn't trying to do that. When I pulled up your Womanist Sass, I wanted to let you do the telling of your story.
Oh, no.
Okay. I'm just looking at the time, and I don't want to keep you too much longer than an hour if possible, because I know that you have other things to do. But I'm enjoying this very much. I do have your two other books of yours prepped and ready to share. I just, I think I often actually talk about your work. There are a couple pieces of yours I refer to often in this live stream, because I try to talk about the issue of the depiction of slavery and enslavement in the Newer Testament, in both primary biblical canons, is important to me, but in particular in the Newer Testament, because it's words of Jesus, right? And it's the kind of I would say caste or class dismissal of enslaved peoples by Paul, right? Those two characters are kind of big for Christians, for people who are, right? So it's a really important topic to me, because for me it's an important topic, but it's an important way of having a reframing for ourselves of what the Newer Testament texts are actually about and what they're actually engaging and avoiding or perpetuating and all of those things. So I know that Chloe and Her People is one of your books, one of your more recent books. Can we talk about that for a minute? Okay. I have to admit, I have not read it yet. I have not procured a copy of it yet.
I love that cover.
Oh my gosh, don't you though?
Yes.
Chloe and Her People.
I had no Cascade Books. I had no say in it. But when they showed it to me, yes, I'm like, oh, I love that cover.
They did well. They did well, right? A womanist critical dialogue with 1 Corinthians. So I think that some people here might know what this is about, but there are probably some people watching who aren't going to immediately connect with why 1 Corinthians is important to engage through a womanist lens. Can you help us? Can you flesh that out for us a little bit?
Oh, yeah. So
is that too much? Too big?
No. Yeah. I mean, I say at the end that and I'm paraphrase. I say at the end something like, "I don't hate Paul."
But
if Paul and I are gonna engage and we're gonna sit down and have a meal, I don't want to be the menu. I want to be able to, let's have a potluck and let's discuss this, right? So I'm having this dialogue with Paul on issues that I think are important and particularly impact the church and how we read Paul and his impact upon the church and Black churches and churches, period. Right. And
white as well as Black.
Yes. And so, so I began actually I was on a panel at SBL some years ago and we talked about this and I had done a paper. In the first chapter, I was preparing for another volume, but I just couldn't get it together. And I said, well, y'all go ahead because yes, but I said, I'll put this in my book. And so I had more time. And so the first chapter is really it's building upon oh my gosh, a name. I have these foggy moments.
Yes.
Yeah. Antoinette
Clark-Wire. Her very important book.
Yes.
Corinthian Women Prophets.
Yes. So I build upon her work, but I say that she that no one has necessarily sort of unpacked more who Chloe is, or who Chloe might be. Right?
Yeah. And there's a reference to this woman in a very important way, right?
Yeah, but she is the source. She is the source of the information that Paul receives, or her people. And I'm saying that I truly, Antoinette Clark-Wire has said that the Corinthian women prophets are very important, and she focuses on them. But I'm saying, well, Chloe is too, and I believe Chloe was one of those house leaders. But she is very important, and she has people.
Right.
And Paul only mentions the men. She mentions Apollos, which is very important for Paul. Apollos and Cephas, who is Peter, right? And then when he mentions these divisions, most of the time sometimes he would drop Peter, and of course Christ, and it seems to be some kind of competition between him and Apollos, right? Very interesting given what we find out about Apollos in the Acts of the Apostles. But anyway, I also say that, so he's very selective in what groups, right, he named. And I'm saying it's very possible, given Chloe's influence, that she was one of those leaders. Right?
Absolutely. Why else would he actually pay attention on any level?
Yes. And I'm arguing that her people were probably enslaved people, right?
Okay. And you want to tell us how you come to that belief?
Yes.
Okay.
Because she has people. They belong to her. They're not her children, she said out there, right? And in ancient society, right, a lot of slave owners sent their slaves to deliver messages.
Of course. It's one of the roles.
And so it is her people. That is a major role of slaves.
Right.
And so it makes sense to me that her people are slaves. And then I'm saying Chloe was probably a freed woman.
Okay.
And I come to that because freed persons owned slaves in antiquity, right? And also because her name, the fact that her name was a common slave name.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
In antiquity.
Okay.
And in modern slavery.
Oh, I did.
Yes, isn't that fascinating?
It is. I did not know that.
In antiquity, right? I found a lot of places with slave woman's named Chloe.
That's interesting.
And in the enslavement of Africans, it was a common slave name in both spaces. So I bring them together, and I look at oh my gosh, forgetting her name, a black, well-known black author who wrote about Black Chloe. Now, so I use Black Chloe to imagine what Chloe in Paul's gospel would have been like, what her life would have been like.
I love it. Thank
you. So that's chapter 1.
Okay. And you don't have to unpack the whole book for us if you don't want to. I'm just interested in helping people see that this kind of thing is not just possible, but it's quite probable, right? Mm-hmm. And I don't need definitives, by the way. I'm not interested in saying, well, this is what it is, or this is what Paul thought, or this is what Paul did and said. I'm not interested in that. I in particular appreciate what your work has helped me to do, which is to see you've kind of just problematized things a little bit so that I could see it differently, and to be able to just sit with and consider that Paul is taking messages from enslaved peoples, and he's respecting the words, and it is coming from a woman, and the fact that he's even going to hear them out says something important about Chloe, right? And her power, her presence, that this man is going to respect her input at all. That to me, and as well as the other ways that you've showed me to think differently about some of these sayings in passages. So we don't need to get into the whole thing unless there's a really juicy bit that you'd like to share.
There is when you get to the love chapter, but I'm like, look, when Paul talks about who should remain single, who should marry. I think we need to pay attention that for Paul, it's all about lust. It ain't got nothing to do with love.
Nothing to do with love. No.
Thank you for that. I'll leave that there. But like you said, yes. But like you say, permission to read with your book. Permission to read. We need to give ourselves permission to read differently. Right? To read the scriptures differently instead of the ways we've been told to read, which cause us to ignore a lot of stuff and act like we already know what's there.
Yes. And at least in my case, I needed in so, for so long, I needed all of the things to be good. And so when I read your piece about the 10 bridesmaids, right? The 5 wise and 5 foolish, which I'm putting in air quotes because, but you went there. You talked about how the way Jesus is being depicted in this particular story, right, is he is using the lives of enslaved people to talk about something about the kingdom. That's one piece, right? Just that is worth pausing to reflect upon, right? And then the piece that these women are combative with each other because of the system they're part of. And he's affirming this, right? And he's holding this up as be like the wise ones and be a bunch of bitches to the other. Like, it's none of it's good, right? And the way that people are being forced to always be on guard, always be alert. And this is exhausting, right? And that is something. And so you compare it to enslaved people's realities on this continent. And that was so powerful for me and helpful for me to look back at this story and see not just this guy, it just made the guy that I think of in the Gospels, this guy Jesus, like, wow, way more human. And in a way that this piece at least is problematic for me, but it's also understandable in the context that he was a part of this worldview that didn't even question enslavement, right? Not to justify it, but just that he wasn't enslaved, and so he didn't understand or think about it from their perspectives. And look at what he's doing. He's just teaching us to not notice, right? And anyway, so I know that's not.
No. I think it's so important for us to remember, right? That these are not autobiographies.
Right. There's that too.
These are biographies. Somebody else is telling the story in a certain way, right? So, as researchers, we start out with an idea, but we don't always know what we're going to find.
That's right.
We're open, right?
We need to be.
Right. We're yeah, that's true. Yes, right. Yeah. So I never thought I'd find what I found.
Yes.
I never thought I'd be writing what I'm writing now. Never thought I'd be saying what I'm saying now.
I've wondered about that.
I've become open to it. And it doesn't. I had a Greek student say to me once, Dr. Smith, "Do you get any death threats?" I'm like, no. I hope I never, but no, I have not so far.
but you have moved into much more and more critical of the text's space than you were initially. Is that fair to say?
Oh, yes. And no, I didn't start out being critical of the text. Right? No, it's like my need to read in liberating ways. People will talk about one of my colleagues said that I do a lot of deconstruction, even when I preach here, right? I do a lot of deconstruction. And and sometimes people look at that as something bad, as if you have to follow up deconstruction with reconstruction, right? But let me tell you, deconstruction is good. It's good news to a lot of people.
That's right.
You're hitting me over the head with this text, and I'm telling you it's a problem with the text. That's good news to the person who now got a headache because you kept hitting them over the head.
That's right. I like that language actually better. I like to say that deconstruction for me was actually just becoming better educated, being better informed about these things that I just hadn't been exposed to.
That's right.
And I'm going to reconstruct to whatever extent I need to after that. But I like the way you put it as well. That's helpful. So I'm going to say this now. We're probably wrapping up here. Oh, so that's interesting. I haven't paid any attention to the chat today because I've just been so enthralled by your story. I'm going to throw a couple comments up here that just came in. Did Dr. Smith deconstruct? So maybe just a follow-up to what you've just said, I think, because anyway, did you deconstruct? I'll just let you.
Maybe not in what I shared so far, I don't think. But let me say that, let me give a pretty clear example and a couple of things I've written lately, real quickly. So I just finished an essay on a book the young Chuck Kim is editing on Matthew 15. The Canaanite woman, right? And so I do quite a bit of deconstructing there. For example, one thing that we ignore, the dehumanization. I'm focused on the dehumanization of this woman by Jesus and by the 12, right? And the first instance I see is when there's silence, right? When her plea is met by Jesus with silence. Just imagine you are in the ER room. And you're looking for help. You're in the ER, and you're met with nothing but silence.
It's a great way to reframe it.
So that's right. So, and I deconstruct all the way down the text, right? And then when we're looking at, for example, my Luke book, looking at these slave parables in Luke, right? I've already written down the fact that we need to quit just seeing. I do believe you cannot read the New Testament, just like you cannot understand American history without the history of enslavement. You cannot read the New Testament without the history of Roman and Greek and Jewish enslavement. Right?
Right.
And so when we read Luke, right, I think even though most scholars, other than Winsome Monroe, who is a South African white woman who is now deceased, who back in 1990s said we need to take seriously Mary's declaration in Luke that she is a slave of God, right?
Yes.
So now I take it literally and materially. I mean, the audiences, they're in a vote, they're in a society where there's slaves everywhere. You think they're just going to look at that metaphorically? I don't think so, right? Right.
No,
and so
that's
and
right.
so then how? And so I go through that whole thing in my previous essay, right? So now in my Luke book, so now how do we read the slave parables in
That's
Luke,
right. That's right. Yes.
And for example, you remember the slave parable where, okay, the slaves are loyal and they're faithful, and it says that the master comes and then he sits down and he serves them a meal.
Okay.
What does that remind you of? You think about slavery, Saturnalia.
Yeah. Well,
so it's a mini Saturnalia. You know what that means? Things will go back after that meal to the way they were.
Yeah. Right? Well, there is that. I thought you were going to say things are going to get crazy here in a minute, but yeah.
Yeah, they probably did get crazy, right? We're not privy to that.
Yeah.
You know, something like
but that is important,
something
right?
like a P. Diddy episode, probably. But the thing is, you know, we look at that as something great. No, they did that in slavery. They had these once a year where the slave master would serve the servants, but they still knew who was master, who was slave.
They knew their place.
Nothing had changed. In that parable, he is not doing anything that was not done in a slave society. So you just basically get a re-inscription. I'm saying, you know, people are saying these parables are subversive because they've been put in the mouth of Jesus. No, they are not.
No, they're not. Yeah.
They're
re-inscribing it.
They re-inscribe, right? And they do exactly what, and I'm saying Jesus was a free. Winston Monroe said Jesus was probably an escaped slave. I'm like, no, I think he was a freed man, that he was freed at the age of 30 in Luke's gospel, right?
Oh, interesting.
So I'm doing this on the gospel that says at 30. And at 30, you can manumit a male slave, right? I don't think. So anyway, so I go through this whole thing, right? And so I just finished. I gave a presentation at Baylor University on it, but I just finished the essay. We'll go in a book that they're doing there, but also in my own book. And then I'm going to read, you know, the rich man parables. I do think Luke is a reforming rich man himself, whoever Luke is, right?
He might be, yeah. I mean, that makes a lot of sense.
About it. All these slave parables and all these parables about rich men repenting, right? And get your act together, right? And Lazarus, right? You know, hey, go send that guy like a slave. Go send him to tell my family. It's like, no, too late.
Yes.
So all of these things make sense to me.
Totally. And he'd have resources to be able to try to track down as many sources about this guy as he could. Yeah.
Some of those things that make sense to me. I couldn't figure out why, who wouldn't come to a rich man's banquet? Who wouldn't come to his banquet, right? Well, if he was a rich freedman, they wouldn't come. As in, you know, what's that famous ancient text that makes fun of Trimacio? Yes, the rich. Yeah, he's a rich freedman. There's an ancient text, rich freedman, and they make fun of him. You know, they talk about how lavish you are and so forth because he's a freedman. Yeah, he's wealthy. But he's still considered foolish and stigmatized flesh because he was formerly enslaved, right? Interesting. And so if you read that through that lens, to me, that story begins to make sense to me. That parable. And he never invites a slave because he is a freedman. He's no longer a slave.
He doesn't want to associate.
The slaves don't get to cut. Yeah, no, they don't get to sit down with him because he is a freedman.
I'll have nothing to do with that anymore.
Right. So it's fascinating to me when you're open to seeing differently what can be there, right?
Yes. I want to throw this out there. If you all have any questions for Dr. Smith, now would be the time to pose them. Or if you posed them earlier and I didn't see them, this would be a great time to go ahead and restate those. I do want to share this other book that you have that you do. So we don't need that. Okay. If that's okay, do you have a few more? I forgot to ask you up front how much time you have. Do you have a couple more minutes to talk about this book? this is obviously, you can see that they're Mitzi, Dr. Smith, but also Young Suk Kim have worked on this. I'm assuming that you two are the two primary editors, and there are many contributors to this book. Is that true?
We are the authors.
It's just the two of you. Okay. Okay. I mean, it goes both ways in my mind. Sometimes it's really helpful to have a collection of lots of different perspectives, but something like this, it's probably really helpful to have two kind of a more consistent perspective working through it all. Again, I'm sorry to say, I haven't been keeping up on scholarship in the last decade just because there's
a lot out there. There's a lot out there to me.
There's a lot. But so, you and I are talking as biblical scholars, and the people watching us have a vague familiarity, right, with the field. I mean, people who aren't biblical scholars don't really understand all the power dynamics at work and the politics in terms of, what scholarship is highlighted. I'm sitting here preparing, for I get to go to Society of Biblical Literature, or SBL conference again this year. And I'm really excited, but I'm, also reminded that, what I think are the most interesting sections are on Monday and Tuesday, which are right, the least popular time frames, right? So most people there on the weekends, and so all the politics there. But so what I'm interested in, if just for the sake of the people watching this, what is it that why is this book needed? Why is the idea of decentering, I call it the Newer Testament, but decentering the Newer Testament, why is that something any of us should be interested in? And what is that, in your opinion?
Yes. So when I first started teaching in seminary in 2006, I finishing my doctorate. I taught the way I was taught. I used the books that were available to me, right? And and I remember we used to have this class at Ashland called Theology of Scripture and Ministry, and the Bible department. I think I was on leave or something. They decided that that we would use this book by, I won't state the author's name, but it's a book on interpretation, Bible interpretation. And I remember, I said, okay, I trust them, we'll use this book. And I remember using that book. I was so hurt to open that book and see a small section on African American interpretation. And the person who wrote that section wasn't even an African American biblical scholar. And I'm like,
are you kidding me?
No, I'm not. Message me later. I'll give you the name of the book. And I was like, wow, I was so hurt. So I said, I'll never ever do that again. And I also got tired of using an intro book where it had had nothing that reflected the voices of my community, the concerns of minority communities, and so forth. So Young Suk Kim and I used to meet, at SBL for a minute and catch up. And I remember saying to her, I want to write an intro to the New Testament. I need, I write also what I need to teach.
That's right. That's right.
To continue to do this work teaching, right?
Right. Not everybody gets to do that, but that is important to you. I'm glad you get to do that. Yep.
And so and he said, I want to write one too. I said, well, let's write one together so we can get it out sooner and I don't have to write the whole thing. So he's done a lot on Paul already.
Yes.
Now he's done a book on Gospels too, but he's done a lot on Paul. So he did most of the books on Paul. I did, most of, I did some of those books, letters, and so forth too. But so we divided up, but also we start the intro with a discussion of interpretation. What does it mean to interpret? Right. And so we have a dialogue. It's in dialogue form, the intro. And so it invites the readers into dialogue too. Let's talk about interpretation, right? What is interpretation, and how the reader is so important, how our contexts are important and so forth. And then we have things that are not in most intros to the New Testament. We have a section on intersectionality in there. We have a section on Roman slavery and antiquity and Jewish slavery. I wish we had, if we ever updated, I'd add one on Jewish slavery as well. We have a thing about the importance of water in antiquity, right?
Interesting.
And so things like that. And then we have each chapter, and it's a concise book, right? I remember one of the reviewers on Amazon said, finally, intro text is not 600 pages long. So I was like, we are happy to oblige.
Right. Can I interrupt? I'm sorry for just a second. So the decentering then, so when you say the title, right, Decentering the New Testament, is it fair to say that you're decentering how the New Testament has been taught? As well as decentering the New Testament from having too much importance? I'm just curious.
No. How it has been taught, and whose voices are
used for for interpreting it. Yes.
So I do have we do have some dominant scholars in terms of further study. But we try to put in more marginalized, the works of marginalized scholars. Because people talk about they can't find us.
Exactly.
Right? So we in further study we have that, but also we situate it, right? A lot of times, like I wrote the piece on Revelation, and I start with how people like Nat Turner used Revelation, right? Mm-hmm. So even the way we introduce the text, right? And we start with a more minority verse. The epigraphs are from minority voices, right? Like Toni Morrison and so forth. Mm-hmm. And then we raise questions that don't center on the text itself. That center on contemporary life.
Okay. I'm going to pull it back up again for people to see.
So in each chapter, we raise discussion questions, not at the end, but in the chapters, right?
Yep.
That force you to think about contemporary life in conversation with the text, not to focus simply on the text itself.
Yes, right. You're making it applicable in some way.
Yes.
Kind of holding people's feet to taking it seriously, that there's probably a string connecting to these ancient texts, as well as a way to help us understand ourselves better when we look through these lenses.
And we're so happy that more and more people are using this book in intro classes, right? There's a guy, a white male scholar, his first name is Nate. I think his last name is Kerr. And he said one of his friends challenged him to read for, I think he said a year, only works by non-white scholars.
Nice.
And he said it changed his life.
I bet it did.
And now he said he started using this text in his intro classes, and they're loving it. So I'm happy to hear it.
That's fantastic. That gave me goosebumps, actually. I'm like, that's fantastic.
Because let me tell you, I remember we went to a publisher, Westminster John Knox, and the woman there, this was, when did we write this? In 2019 or something? A woman said, oh, that's not an intro text. And I'm like, I beg your pardon. So I can't say as a New Testament scholar, it's not. Yes, it is. And I remember Oxford said to us, oh, we already have enough. And they're all by white men.
All by white men.
All
totally.
by white men.
And I don't like using.
So I went back to my trusty Cascade books.
I was just going to say,
I told young, I said, we only need one publisher. We don't need all these other folks. So
that's right.
And so I remember, bless his heart, my editor there, he recently died of cancer. Chris Spinks there, he died. But I remember him did an interview on a blog, and he kindly said that book was one of the ones he was most proud of acquiring.
Nice. Nice. That's lovely. I'm so glad you got to hear him say that, because I'm sure that he's seen quite a few interesting books through to publication, or saw in his career. I appreciate knowing that that's the feedback you've received too from other people. I do want to just reiterate what you said about this white guy, right, who was challenged to only read scholarship by non-white people. White people are people of color. We're just it's also a color, but I know I'm not trying to like take over that. I'm just saying white is also a color.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so minority Scott. That kind of warms my heart that someone gave him that challenge and that he did it. And of course it changed things for him. Of course it did. I do want to get over there. I see that there's some questions in here. Let's see. This is thank you, Fern Lovebond. That's a new name to me. Thank you for being here. Thanks for the super chat. You said when I broke out, couldn't fit my question in a $2 chat. Yeah. So I'm wondering, did you put your question in here in other texts in other? I don't see them. So maybe it's before it. I don't know if you. Let's see. Fern Lovebond. Okay, I'm sorry, I'm not seeing it. Here we go. Let's see. Firm Love Bond. Okay, here's the. Okay, there we go. Okay, so here's one of them, Dr. Smith. So thank you again for Love Bond. What frontiers do you foresee will offer the most difficulty for modern Christians in maintaining their faith? Wow, that's a big question. Do we have time for that?
I don't even know where to begin. I guess that my first question is what do you mean by modern Christians?
Okay.
And which modern Christians? Because for some, as we can see in this climate, some mean, they're going to maintain their faith by taking us backwards.
That's right.
And making everybody else think and live according to the ways that's what they call maintaining their faith. So I'm not sure in what context you mean. What do you mean by maintaining faith?
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, I think Christians should be comfortable with struggling with their faith, right? I struggle. I tell my students, I struggle with God in this context. I struggle with a God who is supposed to be omnipresent, all-powerful, and yet people genocide is happening in Gaza, right?
Right.
I struggle with a God who's supposed to be all-powerful everywhere, and I struggle, in terms of my mother being sick, and I think that's a part of faith. Faith is not knowing. Faith is choosing that God exists, and you can have these conversations and have problems, and yet you still believe that God exists.
You can acknowledge the problems here and still hope for.
It's not. I don't think it's about a set of doctrines, because hopefully we begin to question some of these doctrines human made. Our theologies are socially constructed or human constructed, right? But I think we should be open to continually reevaluating what does it we mean by God. It doesn't mean the same for me in terms of when I first became a Christian. Look,
that's right.
My mother was a Christian, right? But at 16, I was baptized into the Seventh-day Adventist Church, right? I came up out of the water. The water was ice cold, and I felt the Holy Spirit hit me. Now I know better now. So depending on what we go through life, the challenges we face, right? And I know some people are like, oh, my faith never wavered, and I had cancer, my faith never wavered. I don't know what that means. I'm not in their head. I'm not in their spirit. Right. All I can account for is me.
Right.
And yes, I struggle with God, and sometimes I may curse at God. God can take it. God's God. God is not some spineless human being. Yeah.
Right. I do suspect that part of what Fern Lovebond was getting at was the part of the conversation talking about deconstructing scripture and how that, changes things for people. But I think, but thank you. That was a lovely response to this question. Hope it's at least somewhat of what they were looking for. I do want to make sure I get over here. Thank you so much, LDEM. I feel like I should know what those letters stand for, but I don't remember. But thank you for the super chat. Dr. Smith, What would you like most white Christians to learn that they would not learn normally? So we'll keep this to biblical content, I think, right? It's quite a question.
Yeah, it is. That's a big one too. In regards to what would be my question, but let me talk about, you said scripture, right? That scripture is not God.
Okay.
Right?
Okay.
That just to be sacred doesn't mean to be perfect. I'm staying away from a particular word, but
I've noticed.
It's full of imperfect people. It is a translation. Every translation is an interpretation. Even though some scholars like to act like they have all the answers and like to say we don't have the original, and like to say, well, they believe that the 6th and 6th text is an original. Well, okay, you have, you maybe you
found a way around that.
Yeah, maybe you are God, but I don't know, but. But I think God is, God is, so be open to, and it depends on which white Christians. I don't know,
That's a good point.
Read. Don't be afraid to read the works of scholars of color, and try to read with an open mind. Because too often, and this is with people of color too, Black students, right? Sometimes they think they come in because this is the way the academy works, and this is the way it has been in history, is that white men are seen as the right, as the experts,
exactly.
Right?
Yep.
And
regardless of what they haven't considered yet.
Yes. And these are white and non-white Christians, right? Who believe that. So be open to the fact that who God is, what God reveals, how people interact with God is never a closed book, right? And it is, and no one person or people have a monopoly on it, regardless, right? But be open to the different voices, and don't see them as threatening. Again, what is your faith? Your faith is only rest on doctrines or on a relationship you have with an inscrutable God, right? That's a very uncomfortable relationship. Be okay with being uncomfortable.
There you go.
America, Americans don't like being uncomfortable, especially if you grow up a certain way, right? I have to remind myself when I'm like, look, you didn't have all this as you grew up. So when the lights go out, it's okay.
Right.
So, yes. I hope that's helpful. I don't know if it is not, but I hope. And have humility about our interpretation. I use this word, the hermeneutics of humility. Have humility. Be willing to change. I remember once submitting an essay to a journal. I can say which one, but it was a feminist journal.
Okay, interesting.
And it's a blind review. And one of the reviewers said, not knowing who I was, right? Well, Mitzi Smith takes this position, and I'm thinking to myself, Mitzi Smith had changed her mind. So be open. Be open.
Somebody was referring to some of your older work as they were responding to your current work.
Yeah.
Not knowing
they didn't know who I was. Yeah, they didn't know who I was. So have hermeneutical humility, and I appreciate it. What you said earlier, Jennifer. And so we don't have to say, this is what the scripture says. No, perhaps it's fine, and be okay with perhaps, because we don't know. Right? But we try to provide as much support as we can for our positions, right? And you're free to disagree or not disagree, but just don't throw things out. I think I've been through that time in my life, and I try not to be in that space ever again, where sometimes we just dismiss stuff outright, right? Because we disagree, or something's unpleasant about it, something's uncomfortable about it, right? But to me, that's very problematic. Right, and it's not. it's not spiritually intelligent or intellectually intelligent.
It's a really important pushback on that, on that practice that many people have. I think that's that's a really interesting way of, it's not a very mature way of engaging something. I do know that there are plenty of people, and I'll say this knowing there are people here live with us who have been very harmed by biblical texts and being engaged somewhat appropriately for what the biblical texts are saying. And so for them, I'm just done with it, I think is a respectful response to something that has caused you harm. I do think that. And so for people in faith communities, of course it's important to keep, I think it's important to be mature about what you're doing here. And that's what I hear you saying. But it is important to me to actually affirm when people say, there's nothing here that helps me, or there's too much here that's harmful for me. I'm okay with that. When people say that's what they need to do. But I don't, but I hear your comment in a different context, in the context of people
talking about scholarship, right? Scholarship, right?
Okay.
We're reading scholarship, but then we dismiss it because it's not a white male.
Okay, I misunderstood what you were saying.
No, but they dismiss it because they have different methodology.
Somebody makes us uncomfortable, so we're not going to.
Or because they're dealing with race, right? I had a student, a white female student once, a white woman on a paper once, right? That she didn't like critical race theory because it made black people hate white people, and I wrote on her paper.
She thinks that's what.
Yeah, and so I wrote on her paper. I said, I use critical race theory, and I don't hate you.
Right.
I do not hate you at all.
There's that, and also, if there are black people who hate white people, it's for other reasons.
Yes, and
historically verifiable ones.
Yes. And I understand what you're saying, Jennifer. I mean, Howard Thurman's grandmother threw out mostly all of Paul.
Right.
And perhaps she should have critiqued chapter 12 as well.
I mean, there's that.
I mean, chapter 13, that love chapter, she kept that, but you could critique that too.
You and I have both critiqued that one.
Yeah. That's the problems with that, right? That would support women staying in abusive relationships.
I know. Yeah.
But I remember when I had the tools, one of the first thing I did, and this is an essay that's often read that I have posted on my academia.edu page, right?
Yeah.
Is I wrote this essay on thinking about me growing up in the church and growing up poor, and always hearing the church say, quote that text, I think it's in Lamentations, that I have never seen the righteous forsaken or their seed begging for bread. And it never sat right with me, but as a young person, I didn't know, and not until much older, how to critique and be in that community, right? But I knew in my heart that didn't sit right with me, right?
Yep.
And so I have
you are right, like you and your mother, for just as an example, right? Or white righteous who were being whatever.
And we had to beg. There were times when we had to beg. My mother, she said us to the woman who used to babysit for us when my mother couldn't walk, and said, "Yo, you got any leftovers?" Right? We had to beg. And so, and he had to take welfare at one point. My mom couldn't walk again, right? And so to say that, I'm like, my mother is one of the most just people I know, right? And you telling me the righteous are never forsaken and never feel abandoned, never abandoned?
Are you kidding me?
And there's so many ways we contort our lives to fit into Scripture, right?
Exactly.
When what we need to do is reject those things as uniform. But that may or may not be that person's testimony. And that's the thing Dr. Newhart and I do, and we are witnesses. We need to see the Bible as testimony. Right? It is testimony.
It's a testimony.
It can be very subjective, right? And so there are people there with testimonies, different testimonies. We try to make them be one testimony of different testimonies, and they don't all agree. And so there's this, so that psalmist has that testimony. Okay, that may be their experience. I don't believe it, but it may be their experience. Okay, but it ain't mine. And I don't have to act like it is my experience.
That's right. in fact, we need you to speak up that it's not, you know? Mhm. Well, Mitzi, I am honored. Again, I know I've said it already, but it's really been delightful to chat with you, to have you here. I'm glad to know a little bit more about you and your story. I know that there's been a lot of chatter during our conversation. So you have stirred up some things for people in general. I don't see any other questions for now, but I am seeing comments about appreciating what you've been saying. And so thank you. I appreciate you taking some of your time to come join me today.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.
My pleasure. I've enjoyed being in this space too. Thank you. It's a wonderful space you have created.
Thank you for saying that. I've worked hard, so I appreciate that. Yeah. All right, I'm gonna scoot you into the green room and I'll be yes. So thank you all for being here. I appreciate all of the ways that you support me, whether it's through Patreon or hopefully soon through memberships here on YouTube, but also in liking content and sharing with a friend, subscribing to the channel and getting notifications so that it lets you know when I'm go live or when there's a new video out. Being here for those who want to be and are able to be here live, I very much appreciate it. It's so fun to have people chatting together and seeing the way you all are interacting, and to know that we have your support and you're kind of with us in spirit here as we go live. So I very much appreciate that. And for those who watch it later, thank you. Thanks for your support. I'll be back next week. It's just me. And then I get to start having the Diablo critics on, actually. They're going to be coming in the next couple months, one at a time, to have a conversation with us here live. So that'll be fun. So next week, it's just me. So we'll have a good time with that. I'll see you next week.